It began with a whisper, then a rumor, then a single, devastating test result that would rip open the foundations of the British monarchy. A DNA test. 3 letters. 1 truth. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when royal blood isn't what it seems? Prince Harry had always been the rebel, the misfit, the one who never quite fit into the portrait-perfect frame of the royal family. The tabloids called him the spare, the wild one, the soldier-turned-celebrity. But behind the laughter, behind the defiance, there was something else, an unease that had followed him since childhood. And now, decades later, it had come to a boiling point. Because for the first time in his life, Prince Harry had undeniable proof that the father he had called Pa his entire life, King Charles III, might not be his father at all. Let that sink in for a moment. Imagine realizing that your entire identity, your birthright, the very title that defined your existence, could be built on a lie. Would you confront it or bury it? Harry couldn't bury it anymore. Not after everything he'd lost. Not after Diana. Not after Meghan. Not after the endless war between him and the palace. And it all began, as shocking as it sounds, with a confidential envelope delivered to his home in Montecito, one that Meghan almost didn't let him open. But before we get to that explosive moment, let's rewind, because this story didn't start in California. It started decades ago, in the shadow of Buckingham Palace, when whispers first began to question Harry's true lineage. Harry had grown up hearing the jokes, the red hair, the mischievous grin, the constant comparisons to one man, the dashing cavalry officer James Hewitt, who had once been his mother's close companion. At first, it was tabloid gossip. Then, it became late-night chatter, the kind of rumor that never dies because it's too scandalous to be ignored. Harry looks nothing like Charles, they'd say. He's a Hewitt, not a Windsor. And though palace aides dismissed the claims as nonsense, something about them always lingered. Even Diana, in her private writings, hinted that she feared the narrative could one day destroy her sons. Years later, when those diary pages would resurface, the world would realize Diana knew more than she ever revealed publicly. But back then, Harry didn't care about genetics or rumors. He was just a boy trying to make sense of a fractured family. Still, deep down, he'd always felt different. The warmth that Diana gave him was unmatched, but the coldness from the palace halls was undeniable. He'd watch how Charles interacted with William, how the future king received admiration and pride, while Harry got something else. Distance. Formality. A subtle but unmissable reminder that he wasn't quite the same. Spare to the heir, they'd whisper in the corridors. But what if that cruel nickname meant more than anyone realized? Fast forward to adulthood. The military years. The public scandals. The escape to America. Harry thought he'd finally found freedom, away from the ghosts of his royal past. But in truth, the past had followed him. Because when Meghan started noticing inconsistencies, medical records that didn't align, family traits that skipped generations, subtle clues buried in royal archives, curiosity turned into obsession. And when the birth of their children reignited online rumors about their bloodline, something inside Harry snapped. He wanted answers. Real ones. Not palace statements. Not PR-crafted denials. Scientific truth. So one evening, in absolute secrecy, Harry reached out to a private genetics lab in Los Angeles. A discreet service used by high-profile clients who wanted anonymity. No royal seals, no names, just codes. The swab was simple. A few seconds. But the implications? Unthinkable. He sealed the envelope, sent it off, and waited. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And during that time, his relationship with his father grew colder than ever. Their last meeting had been at the coronation, tense, awkward, and unspoken. Charles had barely looked him in the eye. Meghan stayed home, citing security concerns, but Harry knew it was deeper. Something about that meeting haunted him. The way Charles had dismissed his questions, his need for connection. The way he spoke like a king, not a father. Harry couldn't shake the feeling that Charles was hiding something. The results came back on a Tuesday. A plain envelope. No royal crest. No special courier. Just a thin piece of paper that carried a truth heavier than any crown. He stared at it for hours. Part of him didn't want to open it. Because once he did, there would be no going back. No more pretending. No more pa, no more family dinners at Sandringham. Just truth and consequences. When he finally tore it open, his hands trembled. The paper was clinical, cold, unemotional. Subject A does not share sufficient genetic markers consistent with paternal relation to Subject B. The world seemed to freeze. It wasn't just a sentence, it was a detonation. His breath caught. His eyes blurred. His mind replayed every moment. Charles at Eton, the polo matches, the royal weddings, the lectures about duty, discipline, and decorum. All of it built on a foundation that just collapsed. He whispered one word to himself. Impossible. But deep down, it wasn't impossible. It was inevitable. Because somewhere in his heart, he had always known that something didn't fit, that he didn't belong, that maybe, just maybe, Diana had been protecting him from the truth all along. And as the realization sank in, something else happened, something darker. A sense of betrayal, not just from Charles, but from the entire institution that had chosen secrecy over honesty. He thought about how they'd controlled narratives, silenced scandals, and rewritten history for centuries. Now, he was the newest victim of that royal machinery. Would the palace destroy this truth too? Would they deny, deflect, and bury it like they'd done with every uncomfortable revelation before? Harry wasn't sure. But this time, he wasn't a child. He wasn't a prince bound by tradition. He was a man, and this was his truth. But the question remained, who was his real father? And what did Diana know before her death that terrified her so much she never spoke of it publicly? The answer to that would soon emerge, but not before the royal walls began to crack. Because once Harry's truth leaked, nothing, and no one, in the royal family would ever be the same again. And it all started with that single, fateful envelope. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started long before DNA tests and modern scandals. Before royal tell-alls, interviews, and public feuds. It began as a whisper in the late 1980s, a rumor the palace tried desperately to bury. Harry doesn't look like Charles. Simple, innocent, but dangerous. Those 6 words would go on to haunt the royal family for decades. Because once the press caught on, the story wrote itself. The mischievous red-headed prince. The shy, troubled princess. The charming cavalry officer who swept her off her feet. And the cruel, irresistible question, was Prince Harry really King Charles's son? From the beginning, Harry's very appearance became tabloid ammunition. Where William bore Charles's features, the ears, the mannerisms, the stiff smile, Harry looked like someone else entirely. The bright auburn hair, the squared jaw, the smirk, it all echoed one man, James Hewitt. And though Hewitt denied it, and the palace called it malicious nonsense, the seed was planted. Once sown, it refused to die. Even when Diana herself tried to kill the rumor, insisting she met Hewitt after Harry was born. The world didn't listen. Because scandal sells, and nothing sells like questioning royal blood. But let's pause here. Imagine being Harry. Every magazine cover, every cruel joke, every online whisper, casting doubt on your identity. Wouldn't it eat away at you? Wouldn't it make you wonder, even for a second, what if? He was a boy growing up in the world's harshest spotlight. And while Diana wrapped him in warmth, the palace wrapped him in protocol. He wasn't allowed to ask questions. He wasn't allowed to show doubt. Because in the monarchy, image is everything, and truth is optional. Years later, as he joined Eton and then the military, the whispers followed him. Reporters at parties made offhand jokes about Captain Hewitt. Foreign tabloids published side-by-side photos. Young Harry next to Hewitt on horseback, grinning, identical posture. It was like watching a shadow cling to him no matter where he went. Charles never addressed it. Not once. He never looked his son in the eye and said, "Ignore them, you're mine." Instead, he brushed it off with silence, a silence so loud it hurt. And Harry felt that. Deeply. He began to resent not the jokes, but the lack of defense. It wasn't the world's doubt that stung, it was his father's indifference. After Diana's death, things got worse. Her absence created a void the rumors quickly filled. They said her affair explained everything. Harry's looks, his attitude, his rebellious streak. And though Harry was too young to truly understand, the tabloids were relentless. He was only 12, yet strangers debated his parentage as if it were public property. That pain never left. In interviews years later, he hinted at deep wounds that went unhealed. He joked about being the spare, but the joke masked something raw, fear. Fear that he really didn't belong. Then came adulthood, and with it, a series of unravelings. The army, the scandal photos, the marriages, the feuds. At every turn, someone would whisper, "He's not really one of them anyway." And what's tragic is, Harry started believing it too. When Meghan entered the picture, she noticed it immediately. The tension between father and son wasn't political, it was personal. Charles's distance wasn't just generational, it was emotional. Harry tried to explain it away. But Meghan, ever the curious one, saw a pattern. She saw the same unease every time Harry mentioned his father. She saw how quickly he'd changed the subject when Diana's old friends came up. She saw how he flinched when photos of Hewitt resurfaced online. That's when she asked the question no one else dared to. "Harry, have you ever wanted to know for sure?" He laughed it off at first. But later that night, he couldn't sleep. Because deep down, he had wanted to know. For years. Still, even before Meghan's arrival, strange coincidences had piled up. In the early 2000s, one of Diana's former aides was reportedly approached by journalists offering money for access to her private letters. Among them, a note rumored to contain a cryptic phrase, "Harry must never know." No one ever confirmed its existence. But that single phrase became legend in royal gossip circles. Some said Diana wrote it out of guilt. Others claimed it was a warning. Whatever it was, it made Harry's story less about rumor and more about mystery. When he finally left the UK in 2020, after the infamous Megxit, something changed. Distance gave him perspective. For the first time, he wasn't under palace control, free to ask the questions he never could. And though he told Oprah he still loved his family, he also admitted, "There's a lot that's been hidden." At the time, people thought he meant emotional trauma. But what if he meant something deeper? Because according to insiders, around that period, Harry began quietly investigating his family history. He contacted old friends of his mother. He tracked down staff who had worked for her in the early 90s. He even requested access to archives that hadn't been opened in decades. And every lead seemed to point back to one name. One man, James Hewitt. But here's where things get strange. When Harry finally reached out to sources connected to Hewitt, he hit a wall. People suddenly backed off. Files disappeared. Emails went unanswered. Almost as if someone, somewhere, didn't want him to dig any deeper. Could the palace still be pulling strings behind the scenes? Or was this something darker? Something buried long before Charles ever took the throne? One night, after yet another fruitless search, Meghan told him, "Maybe you don't need to prove who you are. Maybe you already know." But Harry shook his head, because knowing wasn't the problem. It was proving it. Proving it meant confronting the unthinkable, that the man he'd called father might have known the truth all along. And if that was true, then every moment of his royal life, from his birth to his exile, had been a performance staged on a lie. That thought drove him to a decision that would change everything. He decided to find the truth himself. No more palace handlers. No more PR barriers. He wanted proof. Scientific. Absolute. And it was that decision that would soon lead to the test, the envelope, and the results that made global headlines. But before Harry could order the DNA test, something else would resurface, something that had been hidden for decades, locked inside a box of Diana's personal effects. It was her diary, and inside it, a secret no one was ever meant to read. Because what Diana wrote in those pages didn't just explain her fears, it predicted everything that was about to happen. And once Harry found it, there was no turning back. It was hidden in a place few dared to look. A leather-bound journal, its pages faintly yellowed, its clasp rusted with time. Diana's handwriting, elegant yet hurried, filled with emotion, crossed-out thoughts, and ink stains that told of restless nights. The world had long believed that Princess Diana's story ended in Paris. But for Harry, it was only beginning, because inside that diary were words that would shake him to his core. It started innocently. A former royal staffer had quietly reached out to Harry after his relocation to California. They'd worked for his mother decades ago, a woman known only as Margaret, though insiders said that wasn't her real name. She claimed to have something that belonged to Diana, something that had been meant for Harry when the time was right. At first, Harry didn't believe it. Over the years, he'd been offered countless forgeries, letters, tapes, even jewelry, all claimed to be from his mother. Most were fake. But when he saw the item in Margaret's trembling hands, he froze. He recognized it instantly. The faded Spencer family crest pressed into the cover. The familiar blue ink his mother always used. The scent, faintly of her old Kensington perfume. This wasn't a replica. This was real. Harry brought it home in silence. Meghan watched as he placed it gently on their oak table, his hands shaking slightly. "Are you sure you want to read it?" she asked. He nodded. "If she wrote it, it's because she wanted me to." So, together, they opened it. The first pages were what you'd expect: her hopes, her loneliness, her struggles in the royal spotlight. But as the entries went on, they became darker, more confessional. And then, one night, he reached the page that stopped his heart. The entry was dated March 1994. Diana's handwriting was rushed, emotional. It read, "There is something I cannot say out loud. I fear it would ruin everything. Harry must never know. The truth would break him. But I see it in his smile, in his laugh, in the way he carries himself. He has so much of another man in him. It frightens me. I love my boys equally, but one carries the blood of duty, the other, the heart of truth." Harry froze. He read it again, and again. The blood of duty. The heart of truth. It didn't say the name. It didn't have to. Meghan whispered, "Do you think she meant?" Harry didn't answer. He couldn't. He just stared at the page, tears welling, as if the ink itself had betrayed him. He turned the pages, desperate for more context. Diana had written about her growing distrust of the royal household, the lies buried behind curtains and smiles. She described feeling trapped, monitored, silenced. Then, another entry, even more cryptic. "They've warned me to stop asking questions. They say it's dangerous to dig too deep into old files. But I need to know what was done and why. Harry deserves to know where he comes from, even if I cannot be the one to tell him." Harry read those lines out loud. His voice broke. He realized his mother might have known exactly what she was hiding, and exactly why the palace feared it. There were references to private medical appointments, mentions of a doctor in Chelsea who promised confidentiality, a note that said, "If anything happens to me, someone must tell my boys the truth. They'll bury me for asking, but at least I will die knowing I tried." Meghan placed her hand on his. Harry, she knew. He nodded slowly. She always knew. But one passage stood out above all. It wasn't written in her usual calm tone. It was frantic, panicked, as though she'd written it moments before something terrible. "He warned me tonight. He said I should stop mentioning the tests, that I'm endangering the crown. I told him I only wanted honesty. He said, 'You'll destroy everything, Diana.' Maybe I already have." Harry's stomach dropped. "Who was he?" he whispered. "Was it Charles? A doctor? A palace aide?" The diary didn't say, but it was clear that Diana had stumbled upon something forbidden, something so powerful it could topple the royal image itself, and perhaps something that made her dangerous to the monarchy. As Harry read further, his mind raced. So many things began to make sense. Why his mother had been stripped of HRH. Why she'd suddenly feared for her safety before the crash. Why she'd left behind so many coded warnings, in interviews, letters, and now, her diary. This wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. She had known a secret that could destroy them all. And now, her son had found it. He flipped to the final section, a series of loose pages tucked in the back. There, Diana had written about the two men in her life, the husband of duty and the man of warmth. "One gave me titles and pain. The other gave me laughter and courage. Only one truly saw me. The world knew who those men were. Charles and James Hewitt." Harry sat back, silent. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Even the timeline, as much as the palace denied it, seemed closer than ever. Was it possible? Had his mother loved Hewitt before or after his birth? He didn't know. But now, he had a reason to find out. Meghan leaned in. "Harry, if this is true, it changes everything." He nodded slowly. "It already has." The diary had opened a wound that could never heal. And as he closed it, he whispered something that chilled Meghan to her core. "She tried to protect me from this. But now it's too late. Because once that truth was read, it couldn't be unread. And the only way forward was through proof. If Diana had hinted at secrets hidden in Chelsea, at doctors, files, and tests, Harry was going to find them, no matter the cost. He would retrace her steps. He would uncover the clinic she visited. He would find out exactly what she meant when she wrote that Harry must never know. But he would know. He had to know. Because if his mother died chasing the truth, then he would live to finish what she started. And that journey would lead him to one place. The very clinic where Princess Diana's secrets were hidden for nearly 30 years. But what he found inside wouldn't just rewrite his past. It would rewrite royal history itself. After that meeting, strange things began to happen. Harry's security team reported unmarked cars near their driveway. Emails went missing. A journalist who'd agreed to help them research the clinic suddenly backed out, saying, "The story's been shut down." It was clear someone was watching. Someone who didn't want the past reopened. But Harry wasn't stopping. If Diana had risked everything to uncover the truth, he'd risk everything to finish it. The diary had given him direction. Sarah had given him motive. Now he needed evidence. Physical, irrefutable, scientific proof. And to get that, he'd have to go back to the place where it all began. Chelsea. Because that was where the truth still lived. In cold storage. In a hidden vault. In a test Diana had taken decades ago. And a result that could finally prove once and for all that the monarchy's greatest secret was real. But the moment he set foot in London, everything would change. Because someone in the palace already knew he was coming. And they were ready for him. It was a gray London morning, the kind that felt heavy with secrets. Harry's car glided through the narrow Chelsea streets, tinted windows hiding the tension inside. This wasn't a royal visit. This was a retrieval mission. The plan was simple, in theory. Slip into the London Private Medical Center, find the records his mother once trusted, and get out before anyone in the palace caught wind. But nothing about this story was ever simple. He had memorized every detail from the file the whistleblower had sent. The layout of the building. The doctor's name, Dr. William Pierce, retired but still listed as a consultant. And one cryptic line typed in the margin of the old documents. Samples preserved. Lower archive. Room 17A. Room 17A. That was where his mother's truth had been locked away for 30 years. As the car stopped near the corner of Flood Street, Harry looked up at the building. Unmarked glass facade. White stone steps. No signs. No plaque. The kind of place that existed only for people who could afford to be invisible. Megan's voice came through his earpiece. "Are you sure about this?" He took a breath. "It's the only way." Inside, the air smelled sterile, too clean, too controlled. A receptionist looked up briefly, polite but distant. Harry handed over his alias documents, a fake appointment under the name Mr. H. Spencer. The receptionist smiled mechanically. "Dr. Pierce will see you in a few minutes, sir." The wait felt eternal. Every tick of the clock echoed against the marble walls like a heartbeat. When the door finally opened, an older man stepped out, silver-haired, soft-spoken, carrying a kind of weary dignity. "Mr. Spencer," he said, extending a hand. "I was told you had some questions about archival materials." Harry studied him carefully. "Yes, my mother was once a patient here. I believe her records were misplaced." The doctor's smile faltered for just a second, barely noticeable, but enough. "I see," he said quietly. "Why don't we talk in my office?" The office was lined with old medical books and a single framed photo, a younger Dr. Pierce shaking hands with a royal figure at a charity event. Harry noticed it immediately. "I recognize that suit," he said. Pierce looked down at his desk. "It was a long time ago." There was a pause, heavy and deliberate. "Finally," Harry said, "you tested her, didn't you?" Pierce didn't answer. He just removed his glasses and sighed. "Your mother was extraordinary," he began softly. "Courageous, compassionate, and frightened. She came here with a request I wasn't prepared for. She wanted clarity, for her own peace of mind. But clarity can be dangerous when it threatens crowns." Harry leaned forward. "Did you do the test?" The doctor hesitated. Then, quietly, "Yes." Harry's breath caught. Pierce continued. "But the results were seized before I could discuss them with her. Palace representatives arrived within hours. They took everything. The samples, the papers, even the lab technician's notes. Everything, Harry asked. Everything but one. Pierce stood slowly, crossed the room, and opened a drawer. From inside, he pulled a small metal box, wrapped in a faded handkerchief. Your mother asked me to keep this. She said one day, you'd come looking. Harry's hands trembled as he took the box. Inside was a single glass vial, the label smudged but still readable. Patient D, 1994, Sample B. Pierce's voice was low. That's a partial control sample. I kept it hidden all these years. If it's analyzed, it could confirm what she suspected. Harry swallowed hard. And what did she suspect? Pierce looked him in the eye. That you were never meant to be a Windsor. The words hung in the air like smoke. Footsteps echoed suddenly from the corridor. Pierce froze. Someone's coming, he whispered. You have to go. Harry slipped the vial into his coat pocket. As he turned toward the door, Pierce grabbed his arm. They'll come for it, he warned. They always do. Guard it with your life. The door burst open. Two men in plain suits entered. Not security guards, not police. They had that polished stillness Harry knew all too well from Royal Protection officers. Mr. Spencer? One said, tone too calm to be genuine. We'll need to escort you outside. Harry met Pierce's eyes. The doctor gave a subtle nod, the kind that meant don't fight here. He followed the men out silently, heart hammering. As they led him to the exit, he caught a glimpse of one man's lapel pin, a discreet emblem used only by members of the Royal Household Security Office. They knew. They had known all along. Outside, the rain had started. The city blurred under gray drizzle as Harry slipped into the waiting car. Megan's voice crackled through the phone. Did you get it? He took the vial from his pocket, holding it up to the faint light. Yes, he whispered. She left it for me. But even as he said it, headlights flashed in the rearview mirror. A black vehicle had pulled out behind them. Same make, same tinted windows. Following. Harry, Megan said quietly, get out of there. He nodded to the driver. Lose them. The car surged forward through Chelsea's narrow streets, weaving past traffic. But the black vehicle matched every turn. After 15 tense minutes, the tail finally dropped off near Battersea Bridge. Harry exhaled shakily, gripping the vial tight. He wasn't naive enough to think he was safe. This was only the beginning. Back at the hotel, he placed the vial inside a protective case and locked it in a portable freezer. He would send it to the same California lab that had verified the Hewitt file. This time, no palace intermediaries, no forged papers, no pseudonyms. This time, the result would be real. But before he could ship it out, his phone buzzed. An unknown number, London prefix. He hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice said, You shouldn't have gone there, Harry. His stomach dropped. It was his brother. William, he breathed. Silence for a beat. Then, You think you're chasing truth, William said quietly. But you're chasing ghosts. Don't do this. Harry's voice was calm but icy. I have to know. William sighed. Then know this. The truth won't set you free. It'll destroy everything. The line went dead. Harry stared at the phone, jaw tight. He knew his brother wasn't lying. The truth had a cost, and it was coming due. He turned back to the vial resting on the desk, glowing faintly under the lamplight. It looked so small, so harmless. But that tiny bottle carried enough power to shake the monarchy to its foundations. He closed the freezer lid with a final, decisive click. Whatever it costs, he murmured. I'm ready. But he had no idea that, even as he spoke, someone in Buckingham Palace was giving an order of their own. Retrieve the sample. At any cost. And that order would set off a chain of events that no one, not even Harry, could control. Because the next move wouldn't come from him. It would come from the palace. And it would be ruthless that IT was past midnight in Montecito when the package arrived. No royal seals. No courier logos. Just a plain, temperature-controlled case delivered by a silent man in a gray suit. Harry, or rather the prince in this dramatized story, waited until the gate shut behind him before opening it. Inside, the small freezer box from London and the vial he'd fought to retrieve. Beside it, a fresh sample kit, sterile and unmarked. Two worlds in one box, the past and the present, waiting to collide. He stared at it for a long time. Then he whispered, All right, Mom, let's finish this. The decision. For days, he'd told himself it wasn't about revenge. But in truth, it was. Not against one person, against the system that had fed him silence. Megan watched from the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, eyes dark with worry. "You don't have to do this tonight," she said. "I do," he replied. "If I wait, I'll lose my nerve." She hesitated. "What if the result breaks you?" He managed a small smile. "Then I'll break honestly." The sampling. He followed the kit's instructions. Gloves, sterile swab, seal, barcode. Every motion felt sacred, ritualistic, as if he were dismantling history with a cotton stick. When it was done, he sealed the envelope and labeled it only with a code, H01. 2 samples would be sent out, one to a California lab under his alias, another to an offshore facility known for handling discreet celebrity tests. No names, no headlines, no interference. He'd already chosen the courier himself, a former soldier he trusted from his army years. "Deliver them personally," he'd said. "No stops, no scanners, no digital trail." The man nodded once. "Understood, sir." By dawn, the packages were gone, and with them, a lifetime of uncertainty. The waiting. Waiting was the hardest part. Days stretched like weeks. He tried to distract himself. Charity meetings, school runs, long walks through the garden, but every quiet moment became a battlefield in his head. What if the test confirmed everything? What if it didn't? Either way, life would never be the same. At night, he found himself talking to his mother as if she could hear. "Did you know for sure, or were you just scared?" He'd whisper to the empty room. "Did you love him, Mom? Did you love me?" No answer ever came, but the wind against the windows always seemed to whisper back, soft and aching. The message. On the 7th night, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. "Results ready. Do not open online. Secure call only." His stomach clenched. He went into the study, shut the door, and called. A calm female voice answered. "Mr. Spencer, this is Dr. Lopez from the California Genomics Center. Before we proceed, may I confirm the identification code attached to your sample?" "H01, he said. "Thank you. I also need to confirm you understand these results are provided under confidentiality agreement and cannot be reproduced without your consent." "I understand," he replied. His voice was barely audible. A pause. Then, "The comparative analysis between your submitted DNA and the reference sample labeled Patient D 1994, Sample B, shows less than 7% probability of direct paternal relation to the royal reference markers provided in prior public databases." The words blurred in his mind. Less than 7%. Dr. Lopez continued, "Clinically precise. In other words, the likelihood of paternal match with the Windsor genetic signature is extremely low." The collapse. He didn't speak. Couldn't. Just silence, a heartbeat, the hum of the laptop fan. Dr. Lopez said gently, "Do you wish to hear the comparative analysis with the secondary profile?" He forced out, "Yes." The alternate sample, from the file marked JH, shows a 98.4% match. A rush of blood pounded in his ears. He felt the room tilt, the floor vanish beneath him. "Mr. Spencer?" He hung up. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. He sat there, staring at nothing, until the dawn light spilled through the curtains. The aftermath. When Megan entered, she found him still in the same chair. He looked up, eyes hollow. "It's confirmed," he said simply. She didn't ask how. She didn't need to. She just wrapped her arms around him as he whispered, "I thought I'd feel free, but I just feel lost." The flashback. Sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw memories like broken film reels. Charles teaching him to fish. William laughing beside him on hunting trips. Diana kissing his forehead and saying, "Never let them tell you who you are." Now those memories felt stolen. Scenes from a play written for someone else's son. He got up and walked to the window. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear waves crashing against the California shore. He thought of England, of Buckingham Palace, of a throne built on secrets. The decision. By morning, his grief had hardened into resolve. He wrote one sentence in his journal. "Truth is only dangerous when it stays buried." He called the California lab back. "I need an authenticated report," he said. "Chain of custody signed, sealed, notarized." Dr. Lopez hesitated. "That will create a permanent record, Mr. Spencer. Once it exists, it can't be destroyed." "I'm counting on that," he said. He also instructed the offshore lab to send its independent verification to a lawyer in Geneva, someone outside royal jurisdiction. The lawyer would store it in a sealed vault with one simple clause. If anything happened to him, the report would go public. The confrontation within. Over breakfast, Megan watched him in silence. He hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. Finally, she said, "So what happens now?" He looked up, eyes fierce but calm. "I tell them." She shook her head. "They'll deny it. Then they'll deny it," he said. "But I won't." The call. He dialed an old number, one he hadn't used since the coronation. It rang twice. Then a familiar voice, curt and controlled. "Yes?" "Pa," he said quietly. A pause. "Harry." "I know," he said. The line stayed silent. Then came a sigh, heavy and resigned. "I told them this day would come," the voice said softly. "The day truth outran loyalty." Harry's breath caught. "So it's true." Another pause. Finally, "You were always your mother's son." Click. The line went dead. The reckoning. He stood for a long time, phone still in hand, the echo of that last sentence burning in his mind. There was no denial, no anger, just weary acceptance, as if even the man he'd called father had known from the beginning. The world outside remained blissfully unaware, but inside those walls, something had shifted forever. The monarchy, that ancient machine, had a fracture it could never publicly mend. And Harry, or the prince in this dramatized tale, finally understood what his mother meant when she wrote, "They'll bury me for asking, but I must still ask." He whispered to the empty room, "You asked, Mum." I answered. The cliff edge. 2 days later, a courier delivered a thick envelope to his home. No sender, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of cream stationery embossed with a crown. The handwriting was unmistakably royal. "For the sake of the institution, destroy what you have. This is not a request." He stared at the note, feeling both fury and grim amusement. They still didn't understand. The test was never just about biology. It was about freedom. He lit a match and watched the letter curl into ash. As the paper disintegrated, he whispered, "You can burn the message, but not the truth." Then he turned to Megan. "Pack a bag," he said quietly. "Where are we going?" "Back to London," he answered. "It's time they heard it from me." And with that, the stage was set for the most dangerous confrontation of his life. A meeting not between prince and king, but between truth and power. Because some bloodlines are drawn in ink, and some in defiance. But what awaited him in London would prove that truth, once spoken, can be more explosive than any scandal. And no one, not even a crown, would be ready for the fallout. It began with unease. Not the kind that fades overnight, the kind that festers quietly, growing heavier with every unanswered question. For Meghan Markle, the unease started with whispers. Articles, tweets, comments buried in tabloids she tried not to read. And one phrase that kept appearing over and over. "He's not even Charles's son." At first, she ignored it. After all, Meghan had faced her share of public venom. She'd been called everything from manipulative to dangerous. But this was different. This wasn't about her. It was about Harry, the man she loved, the father of her children, the one who carried the weight of two worlds on his shoulders. And when she began to notice small inconsistencies, little things that didn't quite add up, the unease turned into suspicion. It started one afternoon in Montecito. Harry had been sorting through old photos of Diana for a charity project. Meghan noticed something odd. A letter tucked inside one of the albums, sealed with the insignia of the London Private Medical Center, Chelsea. The date, June 1994. A year that kept popping up in Diana's diary too. Meghan asked, "What's this?" Harry shrugged. "No idea. Maybe something from her checkups." But when she turned the envelope over, she saw handwriting on the back. Two initials. J.H. Meghan froze. "James Hewitt." Harry frowned. "No, that can't be right." But the seed was planted. That same night, after Harry went to bed, Meghan stayed up reading more of the diary entries they'd found. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something his mother had wanted him to discover, something unfinished. Over the next few days, Megan started researching quietly. She traced the address from the envelope. The clinic still existed under a new name. But when she called, the receptionist said the records from the 1990s were sealed by royal order. Royal order? That phrase sent shivers down her spine. It wasn't just a privacy matter, it was control. She knew what that meant. When the royals wanted something buried, it vanished forever. And that only made her more determined. Because now it wasn't just about curiosity. It was about protection. If there was truth hidden there, it could explain the relentless way the palace had treated Harry, and why every attempt he made to reconcile always hit a wall. She needed facts. And so, against Harry's wishes, she hired someone. A private investigator. His name was Marcus Clay. Discreet. Expensive. Ex-military intelligence. The kind of man who didn't flinch at locked archives or anonymous threats. Megan met him in a quiet cafe off Sunset Boulevard. He listened carefully, took notes, and never once looked surprised. When she slid him a copy of Diana's diary entries and the photo of the medical envelope, he simply said, "You're not the first person to ask questions about that clinic, but you might be the first they can't silence." She asked what he meant. He smiled thinly. "Let's just say, people who went looking before didn't get far." The next few weeks were a blur. Marcus began his search through private archives, old newspapers, and databases most civilians couldn't access. He discovered that in 1994, Princess Diana had made several unrecorded visits to that same Chelsea clinic. Visits not listed in her official calendar. Each visit coincided with times she was reportedly unavailable to royal aides. Even stranger, 2 of those appointments matched dates when James Hewitt was also in London. One of them was less than 2 weeks before Diana's secret trip to Spain, the one where she disappeared from public view. Was it coincidence? Or connection? Marcus didn't think so. He told Megan he'd uncovered whispers of a confidential file, one labeled Patient D, 1994, ordered sealed under royal directive shortly after Diana's death. The signature on the order? Charles, Prince of Wales. When Megan heard that, her heart dropped. It explained too much. The silence. The distance. The hostility. She asked Marcus, could it have been a DNA test? He hesitated. If it was, it never made it to public archives. But something was definitely analyzed, and someone paid a lot of money to make sure it stayed hidden. At this point, Megan knew she couldn't keep it from Harry anymore. But how do you tell your husband that his entire family history might be built on a lie? One his mother tried to expose. One night, after the kids were asleep, she showed him everything. The receipts, the notes, the sealed order with Charles's signature. Harry stared at them for a long time. His jaw tightened, his eyes distant. Finally, he whispered, "So that's why she was scared." He stood up, pacing the room. She wasn't paranoid, Megan. She knew something. And now we know too much. Megan tried to calm him. "We're just looking for truth, Harry. The truth can't hurt you." But he turned sharply. "You don't understand. The truth is what they fear the most." Days later, Marcus called again. He'd found something new, an internal memo from the clinic dated March 1994. It mentioned a royal blood profile, ordered under a pseudonym and sent for comparative analysis. The report was marked, "Confidential, do not duplicate." Next to it, a scribbled note read, "Results forwarded to Clarence House." Harry's hands shook as he held the document. Clarence House, his father's residence at the time. He didn't say anything for a long while. Then finally, so he knew. He's known all along. That moment changed everything. This wasn't rumor anymore. This was evidence. Megan could see it in Harry's eyes, the shift from doubt to conviction. He wasn't angry yet. Not even sad. Just hollow. The kind of hollow that comes when you realize your life might be a carefully managed illusion. But the worst part came next. Marcus called one last time, his voice tense. "I think someone's onto me. Emails have been erased, my access revoked. Someone's cleaning this up fast. I need to back off." And just like that, he was gone. No follow-up, no goodbye. His phone disconnected. His office cleared out within 24 hours. Harry didn't sleep that night. He sat outside, staring at the California sky, his mind spinning. If they could erase Marcus that easily, what else had they already erased? He made up his mind then and there. He would take control of his own story. He didn't need intermediaries. He didn't need investigators. He had the resources, the connections, and the courage. He would do what his mother couldn't finish. He would get tested, privately, quietly, scientifically, and when the results came, the truth would speak louder than any royal denial ever could. But as Harry prepared to take that step, he had no idea that the real secret, the one buried deepest, wasn't just about who his father was. It was about what the palace did to hide it. And when the first piece of that puzzle surfaced, it would drag him straight into the past, to a name he'd tried to forget, but the world had never stopped whispering. James Hewitt, and the file that bore his initials. But what was inside that file would destroy the illusion of the Windsor bloodline forever. The James Hewitt file wasn't supposed to exist. At least, that's what the palace insisted. But buried deep in medical archives, beneath layers of sealed orders and erased records, it did, and it carried the most explosive secret in royal history. The story of that file began in 1994, the same year Diana's diary hinted at a mysterious doctor in Chelsea and a truth that must never reach Harry. For nearly 3 decades, those words were dismissed as the ramblings of a desperate woman under pressure, until Harry found the paper trail. It came to him by accident, or perhaps fate. A former royal archivist, an elderly man named Edmund Price, had quietly reached out to Harry through a mutual contact. He said he was dying, and before he did, there was something he wanted off his conscience, a secret that had haunted him since his early days working in Clarence House. When Harry called, Price's voice was frail but steady. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He simply said, "You're looking in the right direction, but you're not ready for what you'll find." A week later, a small parcel arrived at Harry's Montecito home. No return address, no note, just a worn leather folder marked Confidential, JH. At first, Harry thought it might be another hoax. The tabloids had forged hundreds of royal documents over the years. But as he opened it, he knew this was no fabrication. Inside were photocopies of hospital forms, the logo of the London Private Medical Center at the top, the same one Meghan had traced. One document in particular stood out, a paternity test authorization form, signed under a pseudonym, Lady S., dated June 1994. But what made Harry's blood run cold was the note scribbled beside it. Sample comparison, J. Hewitt/patient D/minor H. He whispered the names under his breath. J. Hewitt, patient D, minor H. Diana. Hewitt. Himself. He sat frozen, staring at the page. It wasn't just rumor anymore. His mother hadn't been guessing, she'd acted. She'd taken a test. A real one. He flipped through the next few pages, blood test requisitions, lab tracking forms, chain of custody signatures. Everything pointed to a DNA analysis conducted discreetly between Diana, James Hewitt, and her youngest son. And then came the clincher, the results summary. The one Price had apparently risked his career to preserve. The paper was half-faded, but the words were legible enough to send shockwaves through Harry's chest. Test inconclusive due to contamination in original sample. Retest requested under alternate identity. Harry blinked. So they'd tested once, but it hadn't been finished. That meant the truth had remained in limbo until now. He turned the final page and found a letter clipped to the back, typed on old Clarence House stationery. No signature, but unmistakably written by a royal aide. Per His Royal Highness's instruction, all genetic documentation pertaining to Subject D, 1994, and any related material concerning James Hewitt are to be classified indefinitely. Copies destroyed. Originals secured. His heart pounded. His throat tightened. Per His Royal Highness's instruction. Charles. The realization hit like a hammer. His father, or the man he'd thought was his father, had known. Not just about the test, but about the cover-up. That night, Harry couldn't sleep. He sat in the dim glow of the study lamp, staring at the folder. Meghan came in quietly, her expression tense. "What is it?" she asked. He handed her the folder. Her eyes scanned the pages, widening with every line. This proves your mother tried to find out." He nodded slowly. "And it proves they stopped her." For a long moment, neither spoke. The weight of the discovery filled the room like smoke. Finally, Meghan said softly, "You know what this means, right? If this ever gets out." Harry cut her off. "They'll deny it, like they always do." He paused, then added, "But I don't care anymore. I need the truth." He decided to contact Edmund Price again. But when he tried, The number was disconnected. A quick search revealed that Price had passed away just 2 days after the folder arrived. Coincidence? Or silencing? Harry didn't know. But what he did know was this. The old man had given him a key. And keys were meant to open doors. He took the Hewitt file to an independent forensics specialist in California. Someone who'd handled sensitive celebrity and political DNA cases before. He asked them to verify the authenticity of the documents and trace any digital copies that might still exist in the clinic's archives. Within a week, the specialist called back. Their tone was serious. Prince Harry. These documents are genuine. But that's not all. There's a digital log from the same date, referencing a sample transfer to Royal Collection. That means the physical DNA evidence still exists, or at least, it did. Harry gripped the phone. Where? Buckingham Palace Archives, the specialist replied. Under restricted access. That was the moment Harry realized this wasn't just a family secret. It was an institutional cover-up. The monarchy hadn't merely ignored the rumor. It had buried proof, sealed by royal command. And suddenly, everything made sense. The coldness, the distance, the way his father avoided certain questions. It wasn't indifference. It was guilt. Harry remembered a conversation years ago, a rare moment alone with Charles in Balmoral just before his deployment to Afghanistan. Charles had said, "We all serve something larger than ourselves, Harold, even when it costs us everything." At the time, it sounded like wisdom. Now it sounded like confession. Meghan tried to dissuade him from digging deeper. She feared what it might do to him, to them. But Harry was resolute. If I don't find out, I'll spend the rest of my life haunted by this. He began making plans to travel to London, quietly. Officially, it would be for charity work. Privately, it would be for truth. Because if the palace archives held the last piece of his identity, he was going to retrieve it, with or without permission. And as he prepared for the trip, he couldn't help but think back to that letter in Diana's diary. Harry must never know. But now he did. And knowledge was more dangerous than any crown. What Harry didn't know was that the palace already suspected him. A silent network of insiders had alerted King Charles that Harry was pursuing restricted information. Charles's response was cold and calculated. Ensure he finds nothing. Behind closed doors, aides began moving quietly. Removing files, sanitizing digital records, replacing originals with redacted copies. It was a race against time. Son versus father. Truth versus monarchy. And in the middle of that storm was one man whose silence would soon break. A man who had guarded the palace's deepest secrets for 17 years. The whistleblower. The one who'd seen the files firsthand. The one who would finally confirm what Diana suspected and what Charles feared most. But before Harry could find him, the palace would launch its own counterattack. And that's when the real war for the truth began. It began with a phone call Harry wasn't meant to receive. A trembling voice. A whispered warning. And a single sentence that stopped him cold. There's something your mother told me before she died, something I was never supposed to repeat. The call came from a woman named Sarah Spencer-Lake, a former friend of Princess Diana and confidant during her most turbulent years. She'd been part of that small, inner circle. Women Diana trusted when she felt trapped by the gilded cage of royal life. Harry remembered her vaguely. Kind eyes, quiet demeanor, always on the edge of family photos, half in the light, half in the shadow. Now, decades later, she sounded terrified. I shouldn't be talking to you, she whispered. They warned me never to contact the boys. But I can't die with this secret. Secret? Harry asked, his voice tightening. Sarah hesitated. Then she said something that made his heart pound. Your mother once told me. She wasn't sure who your father really was. And she said the palace knew. Harry froze. He didn't speak for a full 30 seconds. Why are you telling me this now? Because, she said, her voice shaking. I saw what they did to her when she started asking questions. And now, they're watching you. She explained that during the 1990s, Diana had confided in her about the Chelsea clinic visits. How she'd secretly met with doctors, worried about inconsistencies in Harry's medical records. She was scared, Sarah said. She believed someone inside the palace had altered them. Altered? Harry repeated. Yes. She said there were blood tests missing. One of the doctors was dismissed overnight, his records destroyed. But before that happened, he gave her something she hid. What was it? I don't know, Sarah said softly. She wouldn't tell me. Just that she'd hidden it somewhere safe, away from royal hands. That conversation reopened wounds Harry thought had scarred over. He spent the next few days haunted by it. The Chelsea file, the missing doctor, the diary entries. All the pieces were aligning too neatly to ignore. He called Megan into the room that night. She said Mum hid something, he told her. Megan frowned. What kind of something? I don't know, but I have to find it. Sarah agreed to meet him in person. She flew to Los Angeles under a different name, staying at a secluded guest house near Santa Barbara. When Harry and Megan arrived, the woman looked pale, fragile, but resolute. She carried a small velvet pouch in her hand. This, she said, is all that's left. Inside were two items. A faded photograph of Diana and a man in military uniform, their heads close together, and a torn piece of stationery with a few handwritten words in Diana's script. He promised me they would be safe if I stayed silent. But silence is poison. Harry recognized her handwriting instantly. He traced the ink with his finger, remembering the way she used to write him notes in Eton, soft, looping letters, full of affection. Sarah explained how Diana had come to her late one night, months before her death. She was crying, Sarah said. She told me she had made a deal with them. She wouldn't reveal what she'd discovered if they left her sons alone. But who was them? Harry pressed. The palace, Sarah whispered. She didn't name names. But she said someone warned her that if she kept pushing about the DNA issue, accidents could happen. Harry sat in silence, the air thick with disbelief. Megan leaned forward. Are you saying she thought they'd hurt her? Sarah nodded slowly. She didn't just think it. She knew it. That revelation hit Harry like a tidal wave. All those conspiracy theories he'd once dismissed, the questions surrounding the car crash, the missing CCTV footage, the delayed ambulance, it all resurfaced. And for the first time, it didn't sound like wild speculation. It sounded like premeditation. He asked Sarah, why didn't you come forward before? Her eyes welled up. Because I saw what happened to those who did. One friend spoke to the press. She was found dead 6 months later. Stroke, they said. She was 39. A chill ran down Megan's spine. This wasn't rumor. This was fear. Real fear. Sarah handed him one last thing before she left. A sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges. On the front, in Diana's hand, were the words, for Harry, when he's ready. His breath caught. He almost couldn't open it. But he did. Inside was a single folded note and a photograph. The note read, My darling boy, if you ever read this, it means I couldn't protect you from the truth. Always remember that love is not defined by blood, but by choice. Some truths are dangerous, but they must still be known. And the photo, it wasn't of Diana or Charles. It was of Diana and James Hewitt. But in the corner of the image, barely visible, was a hospital badge clipped to Hewitt's uniform. The badge bore the same logo as the Chelsea clinic. Harry couldn't breathe. Megan sat beside him, her hand gripping his. It's proof, she whispered. She left you proof. He felt tears sting his eyes. But more than sorrow, there was fire. For years, the Royal Institution had painted him as reckless, unstable, disloyal. Now he saw why. They weren't just protecting their image, they were protecting a lie. He looked up at Megan, voice trembling but resolute. They think they've erased her. But she left breadcrumbs everywhere. He turned to Sarah. Thank you. Sarah shook her head. Be careful, Harry. They don't forgive curiosity.